This is the Canon RF 50mm 1.8 lens, and this is the Canon RF 50mm 1.2 lens. I can get 10 of these for one of these. Is the difference between the 50mm 1.8 and a 50mm 1.2 lens that big? And if you're looking for a 50mm prime, will this get the job done? That's a great question, so let's dig in and find out. So why do I have the 50mm lenses? Well, I am a 50mm focal length nut. I love the focal length. I know some people find it kind of plain and boring. I love using this focal length. I've been using it ever since I really started out years and years ago. I started with the Canon 50mm EF 1.8, then I went to the 1.4, and then for many years there I was using the 1.2, the EF version. Then I switched over to Sigma when they came out with the art lenses. I used the Sigma 50mm 1.4, and then I jumped back to Canon with the RF 1.2, which is probably the best lens that I've ever used, this lens right here. I'm not spoiling anything for the rest of this video. I'm just letting you know this is an amazing lens. So why do I want or need something like this? Well, first of all, I want to try it out and compare and just see, what really, it's only $200 and this is $2,000. So what really is the difference? Something like this though I want, because I want to be able to put a lens on my camera that's small and light, and I can just go out without having a big heavy lens on my camera. It's, you can see how small it is. It's very, very light, and it's a nice focal length for me. I love the 50mm focal length, and to be able to go out and just shoot casually with something like this, I can almost fit it in my pocket. It's really nice to be able to have a lens like this. With the EF, with my Canon 5D cameras, I was using the Pancake Lens, which is the 40mm f2.8, which you can see, this is really tiny. You can see how small this is. I really loved using this lens. It's actually about half the size of this 50mm lens here. But in order to use this with my RF camera, I need to use the adapter. So putting the adapter on now turns this little Pancake lens into a big meaty Pancake lens, I guess. So that's actually larger than the 50mm 1.8 on the RF now. So this doesn't really hold any advantage to me. Plus it's a 2.8, this is a 1.8. So I went out and I got this, and so far I like it. So what I did is I took pictures, obviously, and I wanted to test, basically on a tripod setup, took the exact same photos using the 1.8 lens as I did using the 1.2 lens. Now, before we even get into those, what are the differences going to be? Well, for one thing, the widest aperture on this is 1.8 and the widest aperture on this is 1.2. And basically what that means is at 1.2 you can open your lens really crazy wide. I mean, you can see through here just like that, just there. You can see how wide this is, wide open. You really let a lot of light in, and it really gives you a very shallow depth of field. The 1.8 does also, but you're talking about a full stop difference between 1.8 and 1.2. So, when we go through, we're going to look at some of the differences. Obviously, you can't compare 1.2 on this lens to 1.2 on the small because it doesn't have it, but we'll see what the differences are at the various different apertures. And we'll see, is it worth it? I mean, is it worth it just to, if you want to shoot a 50mm prime lens, will this get it done for you? Is this enough? Or, if you really want to get the highest quality, well, you need a big, heavy, expensive lens like this. Let's check it out. So on the left here, we've got the 50mm 1.2 wide open at 1.2. And on the right, the 50mm 1.8 wide open also at 1.8. So just drive down to the center here. And you can see on the left-hand side that 1.2, even wide open at 1.2, is sharper than the 1.8. Right in the center of the frame. It's definitely sharper there. And it's open a full stop more than the 1.8. Let's check out the edge. And in the edge, you can definitely see the 1.2 also has the advantage wide open over the 1.8 in sharpness, in contrast. It's actually pretty great, the 1.2 wide open. 1.8 is not bad in the edge wide open. So let's stop the 1.2 down to 1.8 and compare apples to apples. So the 1.2 stop down to 1.8 looks just about the same as it does at 1.2, and still sharper than the 1.8 on the left. And that's how you want to use these lenses. When you have a wide prime lens, you want to use them wide open. So the 1.8 on the right hand side here is not bad. I gotta say, is not bad. Not as good as the 1.2, which it shouldn't be, but it's still not bad. So here's stop down to 2.8, which is kind of a reasonable normal aperture that you would shoot at. So right in the middle, a lot closer than they were before. 1.2 on the left looks a little bit better. On the edge of the frame, 1.2 on the left is definitely sharper here than it is. It's a little blurry still on the 1.8, stop down to 2.8. So this is the point where you want things to start getting a little bit more equal. You want to see the 1.8 sharpen out in the center and on the edges and kind of catch up to the 1.2 as far as overall quality. So let's stop down even more. Let's go down to 5.6. Okay, stop down here to 5.6, right in the center. You can see how sharp that 1.2 lens is right in the center, stop down to f6. Still just a hair sharper than the 1.8 lens, but not that much. Not enough to make a difference when you're looking at, from a reasonable distance. Check the edges. Again, just a little bit of an advantage on the 1.2. 1.8 is, at this point, should be sharp in the corners, and it really isn't as sharp in the corners as you want it to be. If you're shooting something like this or something like landscapes or something, you want that to be a little bit sharper in the corners. But yeah, at a 5.6 aperture, you basically want the 1.8 to have caught up to the 1.2, and it's pretty close. It's not quite there, but it does a pretty good job. Let's take a look at some bokeh wide open. I have the 1.2 on the left and the 1.8 on the right, both wide open as far as they go. So let's take a look closer here at the middle first of all, and you can see it's definitely much sharper on the 1.2 than it is on the 1.8. Still, the 1.8 is not bad, but not quite as sharp as it shouldn't be as the 1.2. The background bokeh, you can see actually in the 1.2 is much softer, much nicer. It's a full stop wider than the 1.8, so it definitely should be. It should be a lot more blurrier in the background, which it is compared to the 1.8. The 1.8 looks nice, and you see wide open. You see kind of these football-shaped highlights back here, and that really should, as you stop down a little bit, start to round out. So let's stop the 1.2 down to 1.8 and compare them at the same aperture. So now we have here on the left the 1.2 stop down to 1.8, and we have the 1.8 on the right wide open. And then you can see the rounding out of the highlights, the blurred highlights in the background over here on the left on the 1.2 lens are getting nice and round now. It looks very nice there compared to the 1.8 where they have that kind of a football shape to them. But the background here at this aperture looks really nice on both of them. But let's stop it down a few stops and see how it looks. So I stopped it down here to f5.6, and this is where the f1.8 lens should start catching up to the 1.2 lens. When you start stopping down a few stops from maximum aperture, where we are here, it should really kind of start to even out. So you can see the background looks very similar in both of these images, as it should. So the 1.8 lens is doing a pretty good job there. Let's see how sharp it is in the middle. So you can see this 1.2 lens on the left is really, really, really sharp. The 1.8 on the right is sharp. In comparison, it's not as sharp, but it is nice and sharp. We'll stop down to f.6 right in the middle there. And again, a nice blur in the background on both of them. Pretty similar here, where they should be really fairly similar, stop down to 5.6. So now here I stop down to f8. You can see the background's pretty similar between both of these. And right in the middle, sharpness should be just about the same, which it is. Again, the 1.2 is just a hair sharper, but very similar. Very similar images here from the both lenses at f8, which they really should be. So the 1.8 lens really does a pretty good job of holding its own. Stop down a few stops. And the way that you want to use lenses like these is wide open. Here's the 1.2 lens wide open, and dig all the way in here. It's super, super sharp, wide open at 1.2. Take the 1.8 lens, also wide open, and it's sharp, but it's not super sharp. But look at the image like this, and it actually looks really, really nice. So unless you're digging all the way in, looking at your pixels at 100%, you're still going to get good images from the 1.8 lens. Here's the 1.2 again, wide open. You really can't get any better than that. You can't expect the 1.8 to be as good as this. But for what it is, the 1.8 lens, the compromise is you're giving up a little bit of image quality, but you're getting portability and lightness and inexpensiveness. It still is pretty good wide open, pretty sharp. It'll get the job done. So really pretty good results with the EF 50mm 1.8 lens. You can't expect it to hold up to the 1.2 50mm 1.2 lens. It's just not going to be able to. This is, like I said, I've used a lot of lenses, and this is one of the best that I've ever used. One of the part of it is the RF mount system is really spectacular. So you're getting a lot of high quality from the 1.2. From The 1.8, it gets the job done. The focus is fast. It's the shallow depth of field at 1.8 that you're going to like. You know, be able to shoot portraits with a nice blurry background. You're going to be able to get that at 1.8. It's not, you know, a huge expensive L lens, but for $200, this does a pretty good job. Compared to the EF version of this, which is about the same size and weight as the RF version, the old EF version, which we did a review on here a while ago. We don't really love it. And I have a similar opinion about this as far as if you want to shoot a 50mm or a 35mm prime lens and you want high quality, yes, this is, you know, pound for pound, this does a really good job at $200. But if you really want, you know, to take it to the next level or to start taking it to the next level, you know, you're better off with something that's, you know, maybe the 50mm 1.4 that Canon has. They don't have an RF version of it yet, but you'd have to use, you know, the adapter to use it on an RF. The quality from this, like I said, is for the price, it's worth it. It's good. It's just not, you know, spectacular. It's not going to give you like, wow, I can't believe I'm getting such great results from such a cheap lens. It's gets the job done when you need it. It's mounted on my camera right now. It fits in my bag this way, so I'm going to kind of leave it like this. And if I'm just going to run over to, you know, my family's house and I'm going to take some pictures of the cousins or something, you know, this gets the job done for stuff like that. If I'm going to be out shooting, you know, for a paid gig or something, I'm not bringing this with me. But just to have something light that I can stick in my pocket and get pictures with a smaller setup with my main camera, the Canon R5, it gets the job done for when we need to get it done. But if you're really serious about, you know, photography and you want to really try to, you know, get the best quality, you want something that's a little bit better than the 1.8. Like Canon has the 1.4. If you're shooting different systems, you know, the Nikon 1.4 is actually nice also. There's off brands, you know, a little bit more expensive, but like the Sigma 1.4 is a little bit more expensive, but that's really good also, the art lens. But like I said, for what it's worth, it surprisingly does a really good job. Focusing is good, the colors are good, it's sharp enough for what you're doing. The out of focus, the fact that you can shoot wide open at 1.8 is nice, the out of focus. So it's a good lens. I recommend it if you have the RF system and you have an extra couple $100 and you just want to throw something on your lens that, you know, gives you a nice light setup, then I definitely recommend it for that. But is this worth 10 times this lens? To me, it is. To you, it might not be. To me, having the higher quality image and being able to shoot a full stop wider at 1.2, this is definitely worth it for me. So I don't know if that actually answers any questions, but you know, if you have any questions, you know, put them down below. Any comments or anything, we'd love to hear from you. I'm going to put up videos here to other lenses like this one. I'm going to put maybe the Sigma art lens here also. You can check that out, 50mm. I love shooting 50mm, so check those out also. Thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you next time.